Okay, so we're in Chapter 9, Conception, Pregnancy, and Birth. And as I mentioned in a previous lecture, I'm going to focus my attention mostly on the mom, but we're going to go ahead and start off with just sort of the basics from conception through the basic changes with baby, and then we'll go to mom. Okay, so conception. Well, each month when the ovary releases an egg, there's the possibility that it might be met with a sperm if the woman is sexually active. As we discussed in the section on menstrual cycles, the endometrial layer gets thick and full of blood and nutrition in anticipation of a possible fertilization. So the egg gets released from the ovary. The fimbria of the fallopian tubes help to guide the egg into the fallopian tube, and it starts to be sort of moved along the fallopian tube through the action of cilia, little hairs that line the fallopian tube that all sort of pulse downward. If sperm are present within the first 24 hours after the egg being released, then the egg can be fertilized and conception will occur. If there are no sperm present within 24 hours after release of the egg will actually just disintegrate and get reabsorbed by the body. Now, we've often thought that fertilization was just a crapshoot, that the sperm had no idea where it was going. All it knew was to swim upstream, and half the sperm would go to one fallopian tube and roughly half the other sperm would go to the other fallopian tube, and there was no way of predicting where the egg was. But it turns out that the egg actually sends out a little chemical message that helps to guide more of the sperm towards the correct fallopian tube than towards the incorrect one. So there's a little bit of action called chemoattraction that helps to guide the sperm towards the egg. Once the sperm find the egg, they engage in a process called docking, where they start to attach themselves to the outside of the egg. Then they start to engage in what's called acrosomal exocytosis. What that means is they're starting to merge with the eggshell, basically, and they use their little protein packs on their heads to start dissolving the outside of the egg. So you can see that at point 3 and into point 4, the head of the sperms are starting to embed themselves in the eggs. And of course now the sperms start really thrashing their tails back and forth and really trying to burrow their way into the egg. It's a race to see which DNA package is going to be delivered first. At point 5, what we see is that a sperm has finally fully penetrated the coating of the egg, and at that point a little change happens to the egg, where that particular sperm fuses with the membrane of the egg and all other sperm are blocked from penetration. So once one sperm enters the egg, no more sperm can enter the egg, and now the DNA from that sperm can line up with the DNA from the egg, and we can get 23 pairs of chromosomes lining up. So that's the process of conception. Once it's fertilized, we start to call that little structure a zygote, and the zygote is going to start duplicating the cells. So we go from a single cell fertilized egg to a zygote that starts to divide into 2 cells, then 4 cells, then 8 cells, and blah blah blah, as it's moving down the fallopian tube toward the uterus. Okay, so here's my little timeline of what's going to be happening, the timeline of the pregnancy as we discuss pregnancy changes. So we've got the first trimester would be the first third of pregnancy, which is about 12 weeks long from conception until the 12th week, and then we've got the second trimester, which would be the next 12 weeks, and then the third trimester, which would be the final 12 weeks, roughly. The blastocyst is what we call the structure that's present about day 5 after conception. So this is still just not attached to mom yet. It's moving down the fallopian tube, and it's duplicating and replicating the cells. So all these cells are all identical to each other at this point. On day 14 is when the blastocyst will implant in the endometrial layer of the uterus. And when I say implant, it embeds itself really deeply in that endometrial layer. And for some women, about day 14, when this implantation occurs, they'll see a scant amount of blood that'll come out of their vagina. And if they've been hoping against all hope that they aren't really pregnant, at this point their period's about due right now, they may think they just saw their period. And they might think, whew, thank goodness I was bleeding. When in fact it was just the scant amount of blood that's caused by the implantation of the blastocyst into the endometrial layer. The green cells there are what's going to become the embryo later. Right now it's just a embryoblast. The purple cells are what's going to become the amniotic sac, and then the lavender in this drawing, the light part in the middle, is going to become the amniotic fluid. Okay, now some stuff that can happen to mom during this part of pregnancy between conception and implantation in the uterus is that she could experience what's called an ectopic pregnancy. Sometimes it's colloquially called a tubal pregnancy, which is kind of a misnomer because the implantation isn't always in the tube. You'll notice that from this picture. So what we've got is a fertilized egg in lots of different places. Like I mentioned, normally the fimbria of the fallopian tube will help to guide the egg into the fallopian tube. But sometimes it doesn't go down the fallopian tube. And it could be that the egg makes it into the fallopian tube at first, but then somehow gets sucked back out after fertilization and ends up implanting on the ovary. So you see that line pointing at the ovarian ectopic pregnancy, or it implants somewhere else in the abdomen, so it's called an abdominal pregnancy, or it implants on the outside of the uterus, so that's called an intramural, or it can implant on the outside of the fallopian tube, so it's called an infundibular tubal. Lots of different ways. When it's towards the opening, it's called infundibular. And then it could potentially, and then I see the intraligamentous. So it's implanted in that ligament that holds the ovaries to the fallopian tubes. Then all the other positions are somewhere along the tube there. So you get the ampular. So the infundibular is technically inside the tube. Ampular is inside the tube, but it's a little farther along. Isthmic is even farther along, not yet to the uterus. Interstitial is where it's implanted in the muscle in the uterus. Cervical is when it's too close to the cervical opening. So there are different places where it could be, which are incorrect places for the implantation of the egg. So the ones that are implanted in the fallopian tube are ones that can create significant pain for mom, and that's how she knows she has an ectopic pregnancy, because the fallopian tube is not designed to stretch. So as the egg is duplicating the cells and becoming a blastocyst, it's getting bigger in size, and a fallopian tube can't stretch. So as it's getting bigger, it will rupture the fallopian tube, and so mom will feel that pain and know that something's wrong. Unfortunately, if it ruptures, it can rupture the fallopian tube entirely, so that pretty much eggs and sperm really can't get together anymore on that side. Sometimes if the implantation is outside the uterus, abdominal, ovarian, intraligamentous, you might have seen people on like TLC who had pregnancies in these positions that they had no idea it was outside their womb and things like that. Some have been carried to term. The thing is, these body parts are not designed to nurture a fertilized egg and a growing fetus, and so it most commonly is not going to be a successful pregnancy. Most of these ectopic pregnancies are going to be either don't make it on their own, or if they're in certain positions, they need to be removed or to save mom's health. So and the baby was not going to make it anyway. So those are ectopic pregnancies. So the first 8 weeks from conception to week 8, we call a baby an embryo during that stage. Here's a 4-week gestation embryo. And if any of you have any experience with maybe being vet students or something like that, you might have seen other embryos of other animals. One of the things that's really notable is that during this very early part of gestation, it's really hard to tell embryos apart. Whether you're looking at a human or a chicken or a puppy, it's really hard to tell them apart during this first developmental stage, because it's pretty much brain and heart is all that's present in this picture, and then an umbilical cord to attach to mom, which is coming out there. But in this embryo, it is human. You'll just have to trust me on that one. It's got a little tail. And then at the top and kind of curling to the left is its brain, at least the rudimentary beginnings of a brain. You can see the spine going along, curving to the right towards the bottom, and it's got all that blood going in there. And then you can see the heart sort of bulging out on the left-hand side towards the umbilical cord. Here we are 1 week later, and you can see things have already started to change and get surrounded. So now the heart is inside. It's being encased by a membrane at least. It doesn't have bones or ribs or anything around it yet, but at least it's encased, and you can see a liver in there. You can see a little flipper of an arm right there next to the heart, and the beginning stumpy flipper of a leg down at the bottom. You can see the beginning of what's going to be an eye lens in about the side of the head. The placenta is present in this picture too, in case you're wondering what that is. That's actually what attaches to mom. So that's actually all of what you're looking at in this picture is entirely baby's cells. So the placenta is completely comprised of baby's own cells. Here we are at 6 weeks gestation, so 1 more week of development, and now you can see for sure where the lens of the eye is. And you can see the beginning of a little nose directly adjacent to it. You can see that the arm has grown in their little fingers. You can see that we're getting more encasement around the organs. The brain is getting bigger. Look at the little leg with the little toes and feet on it, and then you can see definitely you can see the blood flow and stuff through the umbilical cord. And then here we are 8 weeks gestation, and this picture includes the placenta and then also the amniotic sac that the baby's floating around in. The amniotic sac is all baby cells and everything. I like this picture because it can show you how far apart the eyes are at this point. 8 weeks gestation, look how far apart those eyes are. The eyes actually start completely on the side of the head, and then they move towards the front of the face, and the nose actually starts up on the top of the head more like a blowhole, and then it migrates to the front of the face. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that that is required to happen in order to end up with a very human looking face. So once the baby gets to 9 weeks, then we start to call it a fetus, and we call it a fetus all the way until birth. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break here, and we'll come back and talk about stuff that's going on with mom. We'll start with morning sickness.